it's Laurie. Thanks for stopping by. Today, I'm making 3 Dollar Tree Fall Farmhouse DIYs. These are all easy and inexpensive to make, and you can always change up the colors to match your home decor. I'm starting my first project using one of the Farm Fresh calendars from the Dollar Tree. These literally went flying out of the store, and luckily I was able to get one of them, so I'm going to use it for this project. I'm using the Happy Harvest, but I thought you might like to see all the cute pictures. I found this frame at the Dollar Tree, and it measures a little larger than 12 by 12, and it fits the calendar page inside it perfectly. So I just removed all the wrapping, and then I took the frame apart. Now you can leave the black frame as is, but I decided to paint mine gray to complement the stripes on the picture. I then used my gray acrylic paint and I gave the frame a complete coat. Now that my frame has dried, I'm adding in the glass, and then I'm placing in the Happy Harvest print. I'm also adding in the frame insert, and I'm just turning it upside down. This will give it a little bit of an extra backing, and by doing this it will also hide that little hanger hole that's on the print. I think this looks super cute as is, but I'm going to add a few more things to it. I found these pretty white maple leaves at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use these along with some of the fall colored leaves. I decided which ones I wanted to use, and this part is so easy. I just used my glue gun and I glued them into opposite corners. When they were all attached, I then hot glued on the white. I wanted to share with you today that I'm participating in the Harvest Market Collab, and it's being hosted by my friends Leeny from Krafty Leeny and Nadia from DIY with Nadia. They both have amazing channels, and I will link those below in my description, and you can check them out along with my other crafty friends on the playlist. I'll have that linked below as well. With my leaves attached, I'm now going to use some of these little pumpkins that I found at the Dollar Tree. They were each attached to a wire, so I just pulled all 4 of them free. Then, once again, using my glue gun, I attached 2 in each corner. With all the pumpkins in place, I'm going to add on an accent bow, and you can use this Farmhouse ribbon from the Dollar Tree. This will work great. I wanted my bow to be a little bit bigger, so I'm using some ribbon that I already had on hand. Then, using my buffalo check ribbon, I just made a simple bow. I cut the ends at an angle, and then using my glue gun, I attached it to the upper corner. To kind of mimic the leaves on a pumpkin, I added a green leaf between each set. To add on another accent, I have this berry pick from the Dollar Tree. They're each individual wires, so I just pulled a few off. Then, using my glue gun, I just randomly added them to both corners. I'm using this as an accent piece on my counter, but you can always add on a hanger. Once all my little berries are added, my Happy Harvest sign is ready to display. For my second DIY project, I'm using 3 glass containers from the Dollar Tree, and each of them has a lid. If you have containers at home with lids, those will work great too, and I'm just removing the lids off of each of mine. I'm painting my first pumpkin blue, and I'm making my own chalk paint. I'm adding about a tablespoon of blue acrylic paint and then 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Now that the paint and the baking soda are all mixed together, all that's left to do is to paint my jar. When my blue jar is completely covered, I'm then going to set it aside to dry, and I'm going to paint my next jar with my orange paint. I'm following the same recipe. I'm using about a tablespoon of orange acrylic paint, a teaspoon of baking soda, and once it's all mixed together, I'm then just painting my jar. One thing that I really did like about this jar is if you look at it, it really does look like a pumpkin. With my orange pumpkin painted, I'm putting that aside to dry. And now for my smallest jar, I'm making some white chalk paint. Once all 3 of my jars are painted and dry, I like to put them in a 250-degree oven for about 30 minutes. This is completely optional. I just really like the texture of paint once it's been baked onto the jars. For my lids, I'm adding in some pumpkin stems, and if you followed me at all for a little while, you know that I have tons and tons of driftwood, so I'm going to be using 3 pieces of that as my pumpkin stems. Another option is to head on outside and see if you can find some larger sticks, and you could also end up using a cork. For my smallest lid, I'm going to cut off that little center 3D top. And for the other 2 lids, I'm going to mark the center with a marker and then drill a large enough hole in those to accommodate my driftwood stems. And now that the holes are cut, I'm going to give them a coat of this pretty green acrylic paint. Once all my lids are painted and dried, on occasion I've had some paint scrape off of the metal, so what I like to do is give each of them a coat of Mod Podge, and that kind of helps keep the paint on the metal lids. With my lids all dry, it's now time to add in the stems, and this part is super easy. All I do is take each of my pieces of driftwood, I push them up through the center of the holes, and then using my hot glue gun, I attach each one of them into place. And now that I'm done, all that's left to do is attach the lids to the jars. If you're using corks for your stems, you can now continue on with me and decorate the tops. I'm adding some tendrils to my pumpkins, and I'm using some of this Dollar Tree wired jute cord. I want my tendrils to be the natural jute color, but also the color of the lids. So using this large skewer that I found at the Dollar Tree, I'm just going to wrap 1 package of the jute completely around it. After I have the jute completely wrapped around the skewer, I'm then using the same green paint as I used on the lids, and I'm painting the jute. If you can't find the wired jute, I did make some tendrils from regular jute in one of my past videos, and I'll link that below, so after you finish the playlist, come on back and you can check it out. When I was done, I let it dry completely and then slid it off the end of the skewer. I then used my natural jute and wrapped it around the same skewer to get that corkscrew appearance. Now that I have my 2 different colors of tendrils, I'm just measuring them against my pumpkin, deciding on how long I want them to be, and then just cutting them to size. I'm using 2 green and 1 natural, and then using my glue gun to attach them to the top of the lid. Now that they're attached in place, I'm going to use some of the same Dollar Tree leaves that I used in the first project, and I'm going to attach 2 of the green ones to the top. To me, they kind of mimic the leaves that you'd see on a pumpkin. I'm giving each of my pumpkins different bows, and I'm using some of this Farmhouse buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I then decided how large I wanted it to be, and I made a simple bow. Then using my glue gun, I attached it to the front of the stem. To give it a pop of fall color, I'm then attaching on an orange leaf. To continue on adding my fall theme, I'm using some of the same berry picks that I used in my first project. I once again pulled a few away from the main stem, and then using my glue gun, I randomly attached them to the top of the pumpkin. These are the colors that I chose for my pumpkins, but you can always change them up to match your home decor. To finish up my blue pumpkin, I then added another orange leaf to the back. When I was done, I then followed the exact same instructions for the orange pumpkin, but this time, instead of the buffalo check ribbon, I changed it up and I made a bow out of jute. When I was done, I then used my hot glue gun and attached it to the stem. I added on my berries and another orange leaf in the back, and then continued on to finish my white pumpkin. And this time I'm using an orange polka dot ribbon. I already had this on hand and I did pick this up at Michael's. Once again, I'm making a bow for the front and then attaching it onto the stem with my glue gun. I had a couple of extra pieces of the green tendrils, so I just added those to my pumpkins. And then as a final accent, I wrapped a piece of jute around the top of all three of them. And when I'm done, my Dollar Tree pumpkin jars are complete. For my third fall project, I'm using one of these plastic serving dishes from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to flip it over, and on the bottom side, I'm painting it with my orange acrylic paint. When it's dry, I'm then going to use some of the Dollar Tree nautical rope, and using my glue gun, I'm hot gluing it around the bottom edge of the tray. When I'm done, I'm using the same jute that I used in the past projects, and it actually came from a Dollar Tree planter that I used in making this treats container. And after you finish the playlist, if you want to come back, you can check out how I made it. Now that it kind of looks like a pumpkin, I'm going to use that Dollar Tree planter jute, measure it, and cut the jute to make the lines that you see on a pumpkin. As I'm measuring the jute, I'm cutting a piece for each side, and then using my hot glue gun, I'm going to attach them both at a slight angle. While you're adding on your pieces, you don't have to be super fussy because most of the pumpkin will be covered with a sign. When I was done adding the jute, I then spot tacked the center of each piece onto the tray. To help hold the jute in place and protect the orange finish, I'm giving it a complete coat of Mod Podge. Now that it's dry, I'm going to use another piece of my driftwood for the stem, and you can always just use a flat piece of wood for this part. I'm turning my pumpkin over and using a good amount of E6000, I'm attaching it to the back. Now that it's set up overnight and the stem is tightly in place, I'm going to add on a bow. I used these 3 different ribbons from the Dollar Tree. I used my bow maker and made a 6-inch bow. I then wrapped my bow around the stem and hot glued it into place. The Dollar Tree has so many cute signs you can add to this pumpkin, and I found this metal harvest blessing sign, so I removed it from the metal stem. Then once again, just using my E6000, I attached it to the front of the pumpkin. Now that the sign has dried in place, I'm going to add on a few of the Dollar Tree leaves as accents. Then to finish up, I added on a small hanger to the back of my pumpkin. I used some of that same jute and my E6000, and I let it set up overnight. And with that, my Dollar Tree Harvest Blessings pumpkin is complete. Thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed these fall projects. Be sure to check out the playlist. If you're new here, please consider clicking that little red subscribe button below, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.